Hello there, welcome to Field Study, an exploration of food and the landscape. So it's the first week of October and autumn in the forest is beginning to pick up pace, and the nights are getting colder, and in the woodland the trees are starting to go gold on the edges, and I think it's going to happen quite rapidly in the next couple of weeks. So I thought I'd take you out today on a beautiful walk in this lovely part of the British countryside to show you 3 things that are good to forage for right now. Stay tuned. So the first plant we come across today is these wild hops. So you'll notice the hops rambling through our hedgerows and putting on these lovely cones from August through to the first couple of weeks of October. They grow on bines that twist their way through the hedgerows, and their leaves have this 3-lobed structure with serrated edges. So these hops are absolutely beautiful, but at this time of year, the hops are starting to go over and become unusable. So there are a couple of tests that you can do in order to work out whether the hops you've got are oxidized and therefore unusable, or whether they are fit for drying out and using in your beers over the course of the next winter. So the first test that you can do is listen to the sound of it. So hops, when they're young and fresh and moist, usually in August and late summer and things, they won't make a sound because the little things on the cones are too wet. However, when they're ready and dry enough to pick, you'll get a lovely papery noise if you run the cones between your fingers, like that. And the second test, and this is possibly the most important one to test whether your hops are oxidized and bad, is to give them a sniff. So if you get your nose right in there between the little bits of the cone, firstly you should be able to see this lovely bright yellow resin on the insides, and that is where all of your alpha acids and bitterness and aroma come from. So it's that resin on the inside that gives hops their characteristic flavour and smell. So check that that's bright yellow and then get your nose in there. Now you're smelling for beautiful citrusy, tropical notes. That's the kind of stuff that you want. Anything that reminds you of a beautiful hazy IPA, that lovely intense hoppy aroma. That's what you should be getting from this. Now, if the hop has oxidized and has just gone bad on the thing, you might see a little bit of browning on the cone, and it will start to smell like garlic or onions, and sometimes a little bit cheesy and funky. So if you can smell garlic or onions, don't use the hop in your beer. It won't have as good a bittering capability, and it will make everything smell a little bit funky after the beer's finished brewing. So leave them ones behind. So once you've worked out whether your hops are fresh or not, then you can take them home and dry them out relatively quickly. So to dry out your hops, just put them on a rack in a warm room with lots of airflow, and they'll dry out naturally. Now this should be a relatively quick process, otherwise they do tend to oxidize after you've picked them. So dry them out as quickly as you can, warm room, all that good stuff. And that will preserve this lovely lemony resinous thing, the hop aroma that you're after if you're using it in beer or tea. So there we go, that is wild hops. And later on in the year I will be releasing a few tutorials on how to brew a lovely traditional beer with these wild hops that I've harvested from this village here. So stay tuned for that. It's taken a few rounds of experimentation to dial it in, but it really is delicious. And it's something that next year you can make, and you can put your own beer on the table for Christmas, which I think is one of the most satisfying things in the world. So let's get on, carry on the walk, and I'll show you plant number 2. So the second plant here is the stinging nettle, which sort of needs no introduction in the UK. It's one of the first plants we learn as a kid, usually through bad experiences, which leads to a sort of plant phobia that I found in British culture specifically. And it sort of all stems from having negative experiences with this sort of stuff. But believe it or not, this is actually one of the most nutrient dense, good for you, and abundant foodstuffs on the face of the planet. It sort of grows wherever human beings are in any of the temperate zones around the planet. And you'll find people eating it. So that means the recipes for stinging nettles and other nettles around the world are pretty much infinite. But this stuff is really quite amazing. It's stupidly high in fibre, and it is high in lots of different vitamins and minerals. But the interesting thing for me is it is one of the most dense plants on the face of the planet for plant protein. So it's a fantastic plant to know about and to eat. And I can assure you, you get used to the stings after you've been picking it for a while, so just persevere with it. It's also useful from a technology standpoint, because this has been used to make clothes and string and rope since, well, probably as long as human beings have been making those things. This really is one of those human-friendly plants that sort of follows us wherever we go. So it'll do you good to develop a relationship with it, and it really is delicious as well. I think lots of people's first interaction with it as a foodstuff sort of puts them off. I can guarantee you lots of people watching this will have had a dubious nettle soup from their grandma or a friend that's tried it once, or they would have tried dried nettle tea that probably has taken on a little bit of a fishy flavour as the cells break down. But at this time of year, in the autumn, and also you'll find it at certain points during the winter, when you get a little bit of warm weather, you'll get a new flush of new growth. So it's almost like a second spring. During the summer months, the nettle will go to flower and then to seed. Now at this point, it isn't great for human beings to eat it. It can have a diuretic quality, make you need a wee a lot, and it can, you know, people have said that it can help develop kidney stones and stuff. So best to avoid the leafy parts of the plant when it's in flower and seed. So this nettle here has gone to seed, so the leafy parts of it are no longer good to be eaten. You can still eat the seeds, they'll give you a lovely energy boost, but the leaves themselves should be left alone at this point. But after it's died back, if we get a flush of warm weather like we are now, or later on in the winter if we get a flush of warm weather, we'll see new growth and new nettle tops start to spring up. And these bits are very, very good to eat. So I recommend just picking the tops off and using it as a vegetable. So another way that you can use these is to wilt them down, blanch them in a bit of hot water, and then roll them into balls and then freeze them. So then in the winter months when there isn't much leafy stuff around, you can go into your freezer and find one of these lovely flavour-packed, nutrient-dense bombs to put in your lovely soup or casserole or like a bean dish, and it will do you the world of good and your gut will thank you. And it's just one of them pick-me-ups in the middle of the winter, which is absolutely invaluable. So I recommend doing that. So if you're worried about the stings of the stinging nettle, then I really wouldn't be. Any amount of heat will destroy the stings on it, and also any amount of physical pressure. So there is actually a recipe that I found for a Turkish salad that uses raw nettles. Now it isn't like some sort of macho competition like they do down in the West Country where men just eat them like in order to prove a point really. I don't know why they do it, but it isn't like that. It truly is delicious. When you eat the nettle raw, you get the full impact of its flavour. What I do when I'm out and about, if I am a little bit hungry, snack on the road, want something like this, especially in early spring if I'm feeling a little bit sluggish, is you get the nettle like this and you put it between two bits of fabric and you just start rolling. Oh, and it tries to escape. But you just start rolling like this. There we go. And it will start to break down into a tiny ball. But what this pressure is actually doing is breaking all of the tiny little needle-like hairs which are on it, which is where they keep their stings. Now the sting itself is actually very interesting because it contains serotonin, which is one of the human neurotransmitters that you may have heard of, that transports signals around the human body. So this has actually developed serotonin in order to get the information about the sting to our brains quicker. That's how much it doesn't want you to eat it, which goes a long way to showing you how delicious it is as an edible. So if you keep on crushing it down in your fingers like this, and it takes a little bit of work, but trust me, it is worth it. If you're at home and you want to make a salad or do something with these, get a rolling pin and just keep on going back and forth with it. But if you're out and about and you just fancy a snack, just keep on crushing it down like this. And then if you pop it in your mouth, it is amazing. And trust me, I'm not just putting this on, I haven't got stung right now. What I've got is a infinitely beautiful raw spinach flavour with that sort of indescribable nettle thing going on. But it is rich, it is deep, it is herbaceous, and it is good human food. And it's the sort of stuff that you should be eating. So my advice is go out and make use of this second spring that we're having here in early autumn and get yourself some nettle tops and challenge yourself. Eat them raw. So our third and final plant for today is this, and you'll find it growing absolutely everywhere. So this is the rose hip, which is the fruit of the rose. Now all roses have hips. So your Japanese roses, all the roses that you grow in your garden will have hips like this. So there is one thing to watch out for in our hedgerows at this time of year that does have a red berry, and it is the bryony. So it is a climbing plant. So unlike the rose, you'll see it climbing on vines, and it has massive heart-shaped leaves, whereas the rose has small leaves with toothed edges. Look at you. Nice to see you. Good to have the company, to be honest. The hunt's just been through, so I think he's collecting the worms that have come to the surface after the horses have just been over the path. Huh. Good on you. So here we have it. Your rose will have opposite pairs of toothed leaves with a terminal leaf there, and it will have thorns and spikes on it, like most roses. The rose hip itself is sort of this lovely, waxy, tough-skinned fruit with this little black splodge on the end, which is where the flower was attached. Now, if you look in your guidebooks, you'll probably be told that the insides of these, the seeds and hairs, need to be scraped out because they will irritate the back of your throat. And whilst the hairs are an irritant, it's not necessarily true that you need to process these like that before you consume them. It's a very fiddly process to do so. You stain your thumbs orange, and whilst you're walking along, it's not really what you want to be doing, slicing it open and getting all the hairs out with your thumbs. But luckily for us, the human jaw was designed or evolved to break down bone. So that makes it the perfect tool to use that grinding motion of the back teeth in order to be able to break down the hairs so they don't irritate the back of your throat. Now, the way to eat a rose hip raw is to pop it right at the back of your jaw here and chew. And I mean properly chew. It takes a little bit of a while. Don't pass the food across your tongue. Keep it at the back in one spot and just keep on chewing it until it turns into a fine paste. You'll feel the texture of it change. So take your rose hip and pop it right in the back of the jaw there and chew. Bear with me. And swallow. Lovely. So you might be thinking, why is it worth going through all that effort to chew it so much? And the reason is because the seeds and the hairs actually contain quite a lot of dietary fibre. Most rose hips will persist way into the winter, even after the leaves have gone yellow and fallen off the bush, and will weather frosts and just get sweeter with every frost. So in the winter, when it's hard to find dietary fibre on your roadside snacks, this really is an invaluable resource. So that is one reason, nutritionally, why you might want to eat them with the seeds and the hairs in. Now, it does take a lot of chewing, and if you get it wrong, you might get a tickly cough for a while as the hairs will irritate your throat, but it won't last for very long. But just make sure you're chewing it for absolutely ages. And you'll find that your enzymes in your mouth break down some of the cell walls as you're chewing it, and it just gets a little bit sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. So even from a flavour standpoint, chewing it is quite a good process. So trust me, be brave and go and eat a rose hip raw. Go and eat a rose hip raw. Yes. It's a tongue twister. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week. If you enjoyed it, hit thumbs up and hit subscribe for more foraging videos from this beautiful landscape. Until next week, take care.